Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin, and this is Life, Liberty, and Levin Sunday. You know, I have found over the years that sometimes it pays just to wait a few days before you digest and think through things, and then you can comment. These days, you got to comment right away. Well, I chose not to. So I've been thinking about President Trump and his meeting with Putin on Friday evening, and I thought to myself, there's no way Putin would have met with Biden. There's no way Putin would have met with anyone else but Donald Trump. And I think it's important that we set this up properly. Putin's in deep, deep trouble. He was forced out of Syria. Assad got creamed by the Israelis. He was forced out of his support for Iran because President Trump bombed those nuclear sites. So he's been relatively pushed at the Middle East. What else is going on? NATO is bigger and stronger than ever before in its history, thanks to Donald Trump. 5% each country has to give of their GDP to build up their own military. And not only that, Ukraine is going to be heavily armed. Why? Well, because NATO is going to purchase the armaments from us. We have the greatest armaments on the face of the earth, and we can produce them faster than anybody else. And they're also going to get access to the kinds of armaments that they weren't allowed to have under Biden. Wow. What else? Russia's economy is all but dead. It's just waiting for the final dagger to go into their heart. And who holds the dagger? Donald Trump. Tariffing India and China if they continue to buy oil from Russia. That's all Russia has left. That's all Russia has left. A second tier of sanctions against Russia directly placed on them. What a disaster that would be. Putin's in trouble. His back is against the wall. He's a desperate man. They have over 1 million casualties in a 3.5-year period. Do you know more Russians have died in the battlefield? 250,000. More in 3.5 years than died in the entire Vietnam War? Than more Americans died in the entire Vietnam War? That is astonishing. So the question is, how much longer can Putin do this? Well, if he has his way, he'll keep doing it. You know who his hero is? Stalin. Do you know Putin is the second longest dictator in the history of Russia? Stalin being the first. And you know what else about him? He wrote a document. Or somebody wrote it for him, that is Putin. In 2021, it was published. I've talked about it before. In fact, I talked about it last night. And what does he say in there? He lays it out. Things like 5,000 words long. And I looked at it again. Ukraine's just the beginning. Ukraine is in between him and Europe. He talks about Poland, because, you know, there are Russians in Poland. He talks about Romania, talks about Lithuania, the Balkan states. That's where this guy's head is. Now, this meeting that the president had with Putin, there's a lot of hush-hush, as there should be. It's the first step in a negotiation, in a discussion. And maybe there'll be 10 more. And maybe there won't be. NATO has to have a role in this. I mean, after all, it is in Europe, and we say that all the time. This is Europe's war, right? And of course, Zelensky has to have a say in this, and I know there'll be enormous pressure on Zelensky to give up a third of his country, because that's what Putin will want. Just as there was enormous pressure on Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons in 1994, when Clinton and Britain and Russia promised, oh, give them up, don't worry, we'll protect you. We'll protect your boundaries, and you see what happened there. Nonetheless, here's the situation. Ronald Reagan destroyed the Soviet Union, really without firing a bullet. How did he do it? Economically. The Soviet Union was in terrible economic shape. Russia's in terrible economic shape. Reagan said, I'm going to massively build up our military, which he did. The Soviets couldn't keep up. Then he said, we're going to build the Strategic Defense Initiative. The left mocked him. They called it Star Wars. That was a hundreds of billions of dollars a project. And of course, Gorbachev and the Soviets couldn't keep up. And so Reagan walked out of nuclear talks with them. They were going to basically dump almost all the nuke weapons. And Reagan said, no, we're going to do the Strategic Defense Initiative, which, as we now know, are these defensive missile systems, and we want to build the Golden Dome and so forth and so on. Well, eventually they relented. They relented. Now, keep in mind, Gorbachev and Reagan were friends. Their wives were friends. Gorbachev was no Stalinist like Putin. None. But Reagan still wanted to take down the Soviet Union. He said, you see, Kissinger had it wrong. Détente is wrong. And all these others, George Kennan early on, he had it wrong, mutual assured destruction. The Soviet Union can be destroyed. We build up our military, we confront them wherever they are, whether it's our hemisphere and so forth and so on. But most of all, we have economic power, peace through strength. And he destroyed the Soviet Union. Russia's in worse shape than the mothership the Soviet Union was. Worse shape. Right now, we have all the cards in our hands. Now, the problem is Putin is a monster, like his hero Stalin. So what? 1 million casualties. Who's going to stop him? They have 140 million population. He'll just keep going at it. Will he? Will he? We are much stronger. We have many more cards than he will ever have. Many more nations, many more resources, better weapons. Little Ukraine has suffered less casualties than big Russia. Russia has 140 million population. Ukraine has about 40 million. And look what those people in Ukraine have done to the Russians. Those people fight for their lives because they've lived, historically, their ancestors, under Russian rule. Rape, murder, torture. Why do you think they fight now? Why do you think they fight the way they fight now? They see what Putin and his army has done when they take over these little villages in these areas. They're torturing Ukrainians. They're murdering them. They're raping them. They've taken 20,000 Ukrainian children out of Ukraine and brought them into Russia. That's what Stalin did. That's what he did. They're going to fight, and they're going to fight to the bitter end. So the question is, we don't like to see all this death. We don't like to see all this fighting. So this was the first meeting. And so the question is, how might this end? What's the most just way for this to end? What's the most logical way for this to end? It's for Putin to fail. He's a dictator. He won't be there forever. It's for him to fail. The Ukrainians didn't invade Russia. I know people don't like Zelensky. They attack him for reasons. I don't know why. It doesn't really matter to me. But the fact of the matter is he's led his country pretty well under the circumstances. And look what Putin's done to his country. You're supposed to walk through Ukraine like a hot knife through butter in 3 days. It's now 3.5 years. How did that go? So the issue is here, how do we bring peace without giving victory to Putin? How do you do that? I don't know. But I know Donald Trump is smart as hell, and he'll figure out some of this, or he'll walk away and bring down Russia economically, the way Reagan brought down the Soviet Union. You know, I think the best way to measure Trump in this is to look at what happened to Iran. He was very hopeful with Iran. And they negotiated, and then enough was enough. Enough was enough. We're talking about nuclear warheads in the hands of crazy people, Islamists. Well, here we're talking about a crazy guy, too. He may not be an Islamist, but he's a Stalinist. He's a Stalinist. So this is the first round. I'm not telling you anything that Donald Trump doesn't already know. He knows all this, too. Now, Putin said twice, I noticed, today's agreement, quote unquote, but there wasn't an agreement. There wasn't an agreement. The president said there's been great progress. He said to Sean Hannity, 1 to 10, he would rate it a 10. What did he rate a 10? The fact that they met and got along. That's what he rated a 10. But he also said there's a couple of really big issues out there, and I have to assume they deal with territory and the security of Ukraine's borders. That seems logical if you're Ukraine. You're worried about somebody stealing 20, 30% of your country, and security, particularly after 1994 when you signed an agreement and they were supposed to respect your security. But we have all the power, the tariffs on India and China, the secondary sanctions, the selling of weapons to NATO. NATO's bigger and more powerful than ever before. What does Russia have? Well, they have nukes. Okay, everybody has nukes. We have nukes. Britain has nukes. France has nukes. Germany has nukes. Nukes are not an issue in my view. Now, I don't know how this ends. Nobody knows how this ends. But I do know this. I don't think Putin is going to give up easily. And I think it may come to a point at some time when Donald Trump has to pull the trigger on the economic issues the way Reagan had to. Again, Reagan got along with Gorbachev, but, you know, peace is peace and war is war. And Putin's no Gorbachev. No, he's more Stalin. And his back is against the wall, whether he knows it or not, and I think he does. So it may in the end come down to that. We will see.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.